Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Teachers who have already received pink slips are determined to get the attention of San Diego Unified School Board tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. The school board trustees have just begun their regularly scheduled meeting, and outside, dozens of unionized teachers are holding a rally trying to stop layoffs planned to save the school district some money. And KPBS education reporter MG Perez now joins us live from that rally. MG.
Maya, we are at the San Diego Unified headquarters here in University Heights, where the school board meeting has just begun. But for the last hour, there have been plenty of teachers and union members and their supporters here on the front lawn. Now, many of them have just now started streaming into the school board meeting, where they plan to be seen and heard during the regular session. It is not planned, and they do hope that they surprise the school board with their numbers and their voice. This is all about a $90 million school board deficit that is projected for next year, and the board has decided layoffs is the way to go. Let's hear from one of those teachers and then from the school board vice presidents.
It sounds like the budget is not going to be severely impacted until year 3. And between now and then, there are lots of things that are happening to change our current situation. There's also a rainy day fund that the district could use to help us get to that point.
They should negotiate and advocate for themselves in any way they think is productive for their members. And the same goes for parents and students. Ultimately, the board is responsible for guaranteeing the long-term, the immediate, medium-term, long-term well-being of the whole. And in relation to that, I do believe the issuing of pink slips was necessary.
And so one of the unknown factors in this equation is how much the state of California is going to contribute to that budget. Just a couple of weeks ago, Vice President Cody Pedersen and Superintendent Lamont Jackson traveled to Sacramento in hopes of lobbying legislators to provide more money and a certain amount of money so that they can decide how they will handle their budget and the layoffs. Maya?
Speaking of the budget, MG, what else has contributed to the district's significant budget shortfall next year?
Well, as it did, COVID has affected everything, and federal COVID money is running out this coming year. So that means that funding to pay for teachers and other programs will no longer exist, and that leaves the school board trying to figure out how they're going to make up the shortfall. Back to you.
Thanks for being out there, MG. The San Diego Unified Trustees were also supposed to consider a resolution recognizing April as Arab American Heritage Month across the district, but it got pulled from tonight's agenda. Board President Shayna Hazan and Vice President Cody Pedersen co-authored the resolution, working with their staff and members of the Arab Community Center of San Diego. Last-minute edits to the resolution by the board eliminated references to specific Arab-speaking countries and Palestine. The board is now scheduled to consider a revised resolution with more community input at their April 16th meeting.
It's very important for us that we are defining our own narratives rather than the board succumbing to external pressure. We hope that it is a step for us to have a partnership with the school board, with faculty, with students, and be able to actually shape the culture there.
We are fully committed to our Arab American community and in particular to our students and staff from that community. It's an issue that is obviously at this point in time entangled with a lot of stuff that's going on geopolitically. My commitment is to have a resolution that we're all proud of.
In 2021, President Biden issued a proclamation recognizing April as Arab American Heritage Month. Congress and the State Department later did the same.
Well, looking a little further ahead to tonight, we're dropping down to a low of 50 with partly cloudy skies. Now, as we head into the middle of the week, you'll see a slight warm up, but we do have more rain on the way. We'll break down when that rain is set to hit the area coming up.
The Supreme Court heard oral arguments today in a case on a widely used abortion medication with potential nationwide implications. KPBS health reporter Heidi DeMarco has more on the San Diego connection.
At the heart of the case is the accessibility of abortion drug mifepristone and whether the Food and Drug Administration unlawfully eased restrictions for patients to obtain the widely used abortion medication. In 2016, the FDA expanded access to the abortion pill by permitting mail-order distribution, extending the time frame for usage from 7 to 10 weeks, and allowing nurse practitioners to prescribe the drug. 4 anti-abortion groups and 4 doctors claim the FDA fast-tracked approval of the drug without studying its safety or potential impacts on minors. Escondido doctor George Delgado is one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit. He directs medical operations at Culture of Life Family Services, a Catholic organization providing, quote, pro-life medical care and pregnancy clinic services. Delgado, who did not respond to interview requests, has already made headlines with a protocol to help patients reverse the effects of the abortion pill and continue their pregnancies. Medical groups say it lacks scientific support. While Delgado aims to limit access, San Diego County Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer is advocating for enhanced availability. She is urging the County of San Diego to safeguard its emergency supply of mifepristone.
Whatever happens at the federal level, whatever the Trump activist judiciary imposes on the country, that we're protected here in our own community, and that we have a sufficient stockpile of these really vital prescription medicines.
FDA maintains its support for the drug, stating it has been used safely by more than 5.9 million people since its approval in 2000, a stance echoed by the Biden administration. The outcome of this case could have ramifications for access to medication abortion throughout the country, including in states where abortion is legal. A ruling is expected in June. Heidi DeMarco, KPBS News.
2 Republican candidates are heading to the general election in the race for the 75th Assembly District. KPBS's Scott Rod has more.
All right, let's get ready to see these results.
Republicans Carl DeMaio and Andrew Hayes will face off in November to represent this rural assembly district, which covers most of East San Diego County and includes a 50-mile stretch of the southern border. DeMaio has maintained a strong lead since the first results dropped. He ran a campaign that called out Sacramento politicians from both parties.
We're running against the powerful, corrupt interests of a broken political system. And they do not want me in Sacramento because they know that I'm an independent voice that will fight for what I believe is in the best interest of my constituents.
DeMaio previously served on San Diego City Council from 2008 to 2012 and currently hosts a local radio show. The race for second place was much tighter. Vote counting went on for weeks, and Hayes only secured the number 2 spot when Democrat Kevin Jusa conceded in recent days. Hayes supports tightening border security and being tougher on crime, though he says he's willing to work across party lines in Sacramento.
At the end of the day, my job is not to just, scream really loudly. My job is to serve my constituents and get something done.
The primary election was a crowded field with 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. Under state election laws, the top 2 primary finishers in assembly races, regardless of party, face off in the November election. Scott Rod, KPBS News.
I'm William Brangham. Tonight on the NewsHour, the search for answers in the Baltimore Bridge collapse. Coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Vietnam veterans and their families were at Miramar National Cemetery today for a short ceremony marking Vietnam Veterans Day. KPBS military and veterans reporter Andrew Dyer has the story.
It's an overcast and drizzly morning at the cemetery as veterans and their families pause to remember the Vietnam War. More than 1 million troops and civilians were killed during the 10 years of U.S. involvement. U.S. troops officially withdrew from the country March 29, 1973. In 2012, President Barack Obama proclaimed the date Vietnam Veterans Day. Marine Colonel Brendan Sullivan says it's important to him to honor those who served during the war.
They gave so much and they received so little that I think we would be remiss as a society if we didn't try to make up for that long-standing debt.
Sullivan is the commander of the 1st Marine Regiment at Camp Pendleton. He says his father served in Vietnam until he was injured, an injury that left him disabled. He says although the memory of the war hung over his family for years, it wasn't something they confronted until after his father died.
We didn't want to talk about it. It wasn't something you talked about. After my father passed, I think we changed our minds on that and have become willing to talk about it more. But there's a lot of pain with amongst the veterans and their family members.
The ceremony was short, featuring the Marine Band from the 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, a wreath laying, and comments from a VA official and Sullivan. Veterans mostly socialized and shared sea stories. Sullivan says it's what Marines do.
Well, it's funny. Most of the gentlemen here today thanked me for my service when really the day was all about them. A number of them served in same units that I've served in, and they wanted to tell me what life was like back then and about some of the Marines that they served alongside.
Vietnam Veterans Day is officially observed this Friday. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Last year was one of the deadliest years on record for migrants. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis says tougher enforcement along the border pushes migrants to cross in more dangerous areas. He spoke to lifeguards who are seeing a spike in drownings.
The sound of crashing waves and children playing along the Tijuana coastline lulls visitors into a false sense of security. But underneath the surface, there's a different story, particularly at the U.S.-Mexico border, where the wall sticks out more than 200 feet into the Pacific Ocean.
La corriente está jalando más fuerte. Entonces, hacia adentro. Nosotros le llamamos resaca. Creo que en Estados Unidos le dicen rip current.
Tijuana lifeguard captain Luis Hernandez says the metal posts from the border wall create a permanent rip current that pulls swimmers out into the ocean. These waters are unforgiving. It's not like swimming in a pool, where you can just grab onto a ledge whenever you need to catch your breath.
Aquí no hay orillita, de que ya me cansé, me agarro de la orilla, no hay de dónde agarrarse.
This stretch of ocean is particularly dangerous to migrants trying to swim around the border. Over the last few years, Tijuana lifeguards have seen a record number of deaths. They track rescues and drownings on a whiteboard from their main lifeguard tower. Just 5 rescues in 2020 and only 7 in 2021. Then, 59 rescues in 2022 and 41 last year. Hernandez says migrants cross in one of 2 ways. The first is to just swim around the border, but fighting that powerful current is exhausting.
Entonces lo utilizan como si fuera escalón y se van agarrados de la reja, van caminando hasta la punta.
The second is to wrap your arms around the wall's metal beams and use shellfish growing along the bottom of the wall as little ledges. But those shells are very sharp. Lifeguards often rescue migrants with cuts throughout their body.
Son como navajitas. Entonces eso hace que salgan con heridas en los pechos, en el pecho, en los brazos y hasta en las piernas también, ¿no?
Most rescues happen on the San Diego side of the border, when exhausted migrants are swimming against that powerful rip current trying to get back to shore. Whenever that happens, U.S. lifeguards respond. Jason Lindquist is head lifeguard in Imperial Beach.
If we get a call from the Border Patrol that they're watching someone hang on the fence or swim around the fence or in distress, we try to respond no matter what, because it's in our city limit, because if you look at the ID map, it goes all the way to the border.
Lindquist says most rescues involve migrants who are not strong swimmers. They often jump into the ocean with all their clothes on and carry their belongings in heavy backpacks.
If the current pushes you against that fence, that's a dangerous situation because you can't get off of it. So the fence is dangerous, the currents are dangerous, the surf can be dangerous, and now the water's polluted every single day.
Imperial Beach lifeguards also noticed more migrants drowning around 2019, after the border wall was replaced with a taller one.
We've had, I think in the last 2 years, way more fatalities from here to the border than we've ever had. And it's usually due to migration.
A new study published by researchers at UC San Diego confirms what lifeguards are seeing in the water. Peter Lindholm and Anna Lucier found that drownings increased significantly after the wall was built. from just 1 drowning in the 4 years before to 33 in the 4 years after. To be clear, the study does not establish causation, nor does it attribute the drownings directly to the new border wall.
Well, I think it's important for the lifeguards, the emergency response systems, and the UC health system to know if we have a lot of drowning-related accidents coming in. It's something that the healthcare system needs to handle.
Lucier is a PhD and medical student in San Diego. She became interested in migrant drownings during a rotation at the trauma surgery unit at UC San Diego Hillcrest Medical Center, where she saw a lot of injuries from people who fell from the border wall and wondered whether anyone just tried to swim around instead.
I think here in San Diego, we have a really unique opportunity to study this in a local context. We have partners with the lifeguards, the Coast Guard, other community partners who are willing to help us do this work.
Although the drownings are relatively new in San Diego, they're much more common in other parts of the world.
Drowning during migration is one of the leading causes of death during migration around the world, especially around the Mediterranean area, and there hasn't been a lot of scientific investigation into that. So I'm hopeful that the work that we do can kind of lay a framework for other researchers and other people who care about this issue.
Both researchers called this a preliminary study. They'd like to analyze more data on drownings and rescues from both sides of the border.
I think that we're still missing a lot of information there, and as a scientist, it's interesting to see if we can find information and contribute with that information.
In the meantime, lifeguards expect the drownings to continue, and the work is taking its toll.
It's not just people from Mexico and South America. We see Russian, Yemen, we see a lot of people.
Lindquist says some of the stories are difficult to forget, like one migrant who tried to dig a hole under the fence.
Going back to the guy that dug underneath the fence, he dug under at a time at lower tide, and then he got stuck, and the tide was coming in, and he was basically underwater every time a wave would come in.
Thankfully, the incident resulted in a successful rescue. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And now I'm joined by Gustavo to talk more about this story. Gustavo, welcome.
Hey, Maya.
We are seeing more migrant deaths along the entire southern border. Why do you think this problem is getting worse?
Well, it's the federal government's strategy, right? They call it deterrence or enforcement through deterrence, which we've been doing for decades and decades now, right? Republicans and Democrats, they think that if you make it really hard and very difficult to cross the border, people won't cross. So they build these border walls that push people out into the desert, into the mountains, in this case into the ocean. They make crossing more and more dangerous, and what we've seen and what we continue to see is just more and more death.
And Jason Lindquist, he mentioned pollution. How much of a concern is that for lifeguards and for migrants as well?
It's a huge concern for lifeguards, especially in Imperial Beach. Jason told me that they have to fill out exposure reports every time they go in the water. So think about that, a lifeguard. Every time he goes into the water, he's coming in contact with cross-border sewage, which we've covered here a lot. So it is very significant. And for migrants, it's unknown because there's a kind of lack of data on this. Researchers would like to track it more and see what the long-term exposure effects are, but it's a big unknown.
And the researchers actually described this as a preliminary study, so what comes next after this?
Yeah, that's right. So the study is pretty narrow in that it only looked at data on migrant drownings. It didn't look at rescue attempts or successful crossing attempts, so they want to broaden the scope. They want to know what happens to people who survive, who are injured, what kind of injuries they have. So they really have a lot of unanswered questions. The pollution one comes back too, right? What is going to be the exposure level for a child versus a pregnant woman versus a man? So a lot of room for growth here with the study.
KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Maya.
Well, let's start you off with your weather headlines, what you need to know as we head throughout the rest of the week. Drier and warmer for the middle half of the week, particularly Wednesday, so get out and enjoy it. Meanwhile, as we head into the weekend, the pattern shifts yet again as we are tracking some rain, and yes, even heavy rain possible at times. We could see upwards to a few inches in a few of those areas, so heads up, flooding is going to be a concern. As for tonight, we're dropping down to lows in the mid-40s in Oceanside, San Diego, 50. Meanwhile, as you head a little bit further east, Ramona, you're at 38, Borrego Springs 48, and Mount Laguna 37. Now let's head into tomorrow, where highs are going to rise to the mid-60s there along the coast, upper 60s as you head a little bit further inland, and then Borrego Springs, well, you're at a high of 80 by tomorrow. Now, wet Saturday on tap as we have our next storm that's going to be shifting in, and that's going to be bringing some heavy rain right through SoCal. Again, we are concerned about a localized flooding risk, rough surf, and also travel disruptions in and around these areas. So heads up, we do have some more active weather on the way just in time for the weekend. Not perfect planning by any means. Wednesday, we're at 67. Again, we'll have mostly sunny skies. As we head into Thursday and Friday, we're going to be staying mostly dry there along the coast, but then again, those changes are on the way as we head into Saturday and Sunday. It is going to be rainy even through Sunday, and we are going to see a cool down where we're in the mid to upper 60s for the middle half of the week. We're down to the low 60s by the end of the weekend. Further inland, well, you'll certainly feel that change in the air as we head into the weekend. Again, we're going to see some sunshine, some clouds as we head over these next few days. Highs are going to be running in the mid to upper 60s. Then we're dropping down to the upper 50s as we head into Saturday as that rain makes its way back into the area. And Sunday, we're still going to be dealing with that rain as well. For the mountains, well, increasingly windy here over the next few days, but it is going to be staying relatively dry until, of course, Saturday, where we are talking about some cold afternoon rain. Highs dropping back down to the 30s. Sunday, you're at a high of 54, a little warmer, but that rain does stick around. As for the deserts, well, sunny and pleasant, warm here Wednesday and Thursday. Then we're going to gradually drop back down to 66 by Saturday. We'll have a few clouds, and it's going to cool down a little bit for the beginning of the weekend, but by Sunday, it's going to be warmer, but that's when the rain hits the deserts. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Bree Guy.
The Aztecs hit the road today on their way to Boston to compete in the Sweet 16. The team is gearing up to face off against the team that beat them in last year's championship game, Yukon Huskies. Before getting on the bus, the team shared their thoughts on the upcoming rematch.
I mean, it's a new year. They got us last year, so now it's time for us to get back. I mean, we're just going out there with a positive mindset, and everybody's locked in.
The good news is we're not playing the Celtics. The bad news is we're playing Yukon. So we're up for the challenge.
Tip-off is just after 4:30 p.m. Thursday evening, and if the Aztecs can knock off Yukon, they will move on to the Elite Eight against the winner of Illinois and Iowa State. KPBS just launched a 6-part series, Where's My Village?, about the child care crisis. And over the weekend, we hosted a child care resource fair for families and providers. KPBS reporter and creator of the series, Tanya Thorne, says families in the community need the help.
Families and child care providers filled the KPBS Community Engagement Room to learn more about the child care system in San Diego. The event came after the launch of the 6-episode series, Where's My Village? It follows the journeys of different people navigating child care.
Through these stories, I think everyone that has a child or knows someone with a child can relate to it in one way or the other.
Sources featured in the series shared their experiences.
Say thank you so much for having me part of this project. Lots of stay-at-home moms don't get to really tell their story. I know the word stay-at-home mom, you kind of think, home-cooked meals and the house is always clean, but that's really never the story.
And I wanted to show people, no, we're not trying to be fake out in this world. I wanted to talk to the politicians and people and let them know I'm a regular person who has okay kind of job, and wife has an okay kind of job, and we have the degrees everybody say you should get, but we're in debt. We're in a lot of debt, and so doing this, it was a good way to show and expose to everyone that, hey, we're not making all this money like everybody thinks, and we do need help.
And families looking for childcare got some guidance from resources at the event, like the Carnahan family. Dominic is in the Navy, and Rebecca is a teacher. They welcomed their baby Sylvia 5 weeks ago.
We don't have family, so we don't have that as a child care option. So it's, I don't know, I think there's a lot of anxiety, at least for me, surrounding the child care issue. I'm a teacher. I go back to work in August. So we're looking for child care for them, but we are just really starting, and we're feeling really far behind right now.
They both said they feel lost navigating the childcare system and disappointed at the lack of support.
Yeah, I was expecting some help, some guidance. I think in a city with so many Navy, I think I was expecting more availability of resources.
It does seem like there's a huge abundance of military members here. We all bring our families. We don't really have the networks that traditional people have when they grow up and live where they grew up. So you'd think there would be a little bit just more of like a well-paid path forward, or just like it'd be easier to find these resources. I'm sure there's a lot out there, but just finding them is very difficult.
The Carnahan family did connect with the YMCA, who provided them with a list of child care providers despite being just outside the subsidy income limit.
Said the cat in the hat.
And while the children were entertained and the conversations flowed, many are still left wondering what is next.
Where do we get to the next step? Because we can have a lot of conversations, but what actions are going to be next?
Advocates at the event announced they're pushing for a ballot measure to fund childcare in the 2026 election. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
And we are airing a new episode of Where's My Village every Monday here on Evening Edition. You can also stream the entire series right now. Just go to kpbs.org/Where's My Village. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On NPR's Morning Edition, Stephen speaks with a social psychologist about helping kids avoid a phone-based life. And KPBS Midday Edition is getting ready for the San Diego Padres home opener on Thursday. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.